Hey everybody, today my guest is David Marquet. David is a retired Navy submarine captain and the author of Turn the Ship Around, which is recommended by people like Stephen Covey, Simon Sinek, and myself. I found this book very helpful when I was a naval officer, and I was very excited to have this conversation with David. He's got an amazing story, first of all. He was given command of the ship, the Santa Fe, when he had been trained to lead a different type of submarine. And leading a crew with a submarine is a very technically demanding job. And David found that by pushing control down to the technical experts, the people who really knew the ship, and letting them express their intent rather than looking to him for all the answers, that things turned much better for the crew, that they actually went from being the worst submarine in the Navy to the first submarine in the Navy in 1 year. In this episode, David and I talk about how important language is when leading people, how the phrases that you use, the way that you set things up, the questions that you ask can completely change the dynamic of your organization. David also talks about why it's actually more risky to try to control everything than to give control to the people who know what they're doing. And he explains what is the number one first thing that a leader can do to start adding more intent-based leadership into their organizational culture. All that and more. Let's go to the interview. The kind of leadership that you're proposing is different from the standard that we're trained to. What propelled you to take that risk, to change it up?
So there's a sense that what I did was risky because I was giving control to my team. But I was in an environment where as a submarine captain, I was changed with 2 weeks' notice to a submarine that I wasn't trained for, and everything was different. So actually, for me, the riskiest structure was one where I gave orders and they followed them, which was the implicit bias for the organization. And we had to actively break that to get to an organization where they made decisions and told me. And so for me, it was actually a de-risking to go that way. But that was all that was my logical brain telling me that. My emotional brain was saying, no, this is not right. You need to be the one telling people what to do. When you're in control, there's always more. You feel like it's less risk because you're in control. You're making the decisions. There's more certainty because you're the one saying what to do, so you know what you're going to say to do, and so it feels, but it's really a ruse. It's really your brain misfiring, because even though it feels like there's less risk, there's not. The reality is riskier, and so I had to overcome those instincts and the other thing is, what happens is you get a lot of small decisions versus one major decision. So one big decision, we all know organizations where the leaders made a decision, people say, yeah, I knew that was bad, but the organization goes down the path anyway, big risk, versus a bunch of small decisions. So whether it's a nuclear power plant or a ship at sea or like Volkswagen. So Volkswagen is a highly command and control organization. Did the CEO say, create a cheat on the emissions? Probably not. But through signals, through saying we need this much performance but this much cost, there's the only way those two things, they don't overlap in the physical world. So we have to cheat with this emission level. So we're going to cheat, and then we turn a blind eye, and everyone's trying to do what they are being told what to do. That's what creates unethical behavior. It's these goals, and it's a command and control structure. You don't get them. You get very little unethical behavior if every person takes ownership for their decision. You don't get that. It's only when we can blame well, they told me to do it. Yeah, I knew it was wrong, but they told me. We exonerate ourselves. So if you don't want to have unethical actors, make them make the decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you said it's easier for people when they feel like, oh, they told me, and they can kind of put it off. But how do you get buy-in among the people to want to change from giving up that responsibility when it is familiar and comfortable?
So you're talking about getting leaders to give control to the next tier below them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and getting that buy-in.
Well, I can tell you on the submarine, we never talked about that. Maybe it was just sort of blind luck, but I was giving control to them. So let's say you're the engineer on the Santa Fe. And before, your focus and your perspective was downward looking. You look down into your divisions and you manage those people and you would tell them what to do. Now, I'm basically forcing you to come to me and tell me what you intend to do without me telling you what to do. So that changes your focus. Now you're looking up. And there's still management, but you only have limited bandwidth. So you can't do your job. You can't think for the captain and micromanage your team unless you're an exceptional individual. So the only way you can spend a lot of time thinking for the organization is by giving up this part and getting them to think for you. And so maybe that's what happened. But what we do with leaders is we have them go to dinner and not order. You have to let the server pick your meal for you. And it's a super fun activity because you have to live with the anxiety of not knowing what you're going to get. Even if you just say anything on page 3, anything with chicken, anything without meat. But try and make the boundaries as wide as possible on the one hand, but at the same time, you have to make it safe for the person to choose for you. Some servers will be very excited. Some will be nervous. You got to read the body language. And if you can't get that person to make a decision for you, then the same thing happens at work. You can't get the team to make decisions. And it's always about safety. It's rarely technical knowledge. It's sometimes what we call organizational clarity, which is, well, I don't really know what we're trying to achieve. I just don't know the objective. So how can I make decisions about what the website should look like if I don't understand how you think about the business? So, but as leaders, we can convey that. And once we do, we release the gates. We say, well, now that you know, what would you do? They say, well, it's easy. I would do this, this, this. Okay, great. Why don't you do that?
Mm-hmm. And one situation where the spotlight gets shined on some of these differences is in inspections. And you mentioned in your book that you had T-shirts after inspections that said, "Don't be a victim." And I love that, but I want to hear it from you. I want people to know from you, what did you think when you made those T-shirts?
So there are a lot of inspections in the Navy. We get our reactor inspected, weapons, the ability to shoot weapons, the physical equipment, down to how we prepare food, how we fight fires, everything. And there are different teams that have specialty. And so barely a week goes by when you don't have some group inspecting the ship. And we had this bad language pattern, which we called for show. So the idea was, let's say you're supposed to read the manual and then do the step 1, make this selection on a button. Let's step 2, disconnect the wire. Step 3, do so that kind of thing. And you're supposed to read it aloud and then do it. And the guys would say, okay, well, we're doing this for show because we don't really do it. And we'll do it for the inspector, but then we'll just, when we're actually doing it, I'll just go, okay, bup, which of course is a worse process because there's a greater likelihood of making a mistake. So I said, no, there's no such thing as for show. So that was change number 1. The way we're going to operate the ship is not going to be different whether there's someone standing behind you inspecting you or not. So So we got one consistent way of operating the ship. So that reduces the mental burden of saying, oh, well, I do this for that, but this. Number two is the inspector is your friend. The phrase was embrace the inspector. And we said, I want you to show them everything that you're having trouble with. In the old way, the inspector would come and review the big books, review the records, and you'd be like, yeah, I know there's a problem on page 200. I hope they don't find it. And the new way was, hey, let me just show you before you get started. Let me save you some time. On page 200, I didn't really know how to account for this. This is what I did. What do you think? And the inspectors are coming to me like, your guys are crazy. But number one, they learned. Number two, every time it was sort of, well, these guys are sort of B plus, A minus. They always gave us the benefit of the doubt because it was so much fun for the inspectors to be on the ship. It wasn't this big this. It was like, hey, let's have a big bear hug. And what was I feel like I'm missing the original thrust of the question, though.
It's the mentality of not being a victim. The don't be a victim t-shirts.
Right. So the final piece was, and we're in charge. It's us, right? And I so many times things happen in our lives. Well, blah blah blah, this, that, everything else, and there's some things you can't control. Like the sun's going to come up in the east, right? You can't control that, but recognize what you can control. Like it's the old excuse, I'm sorry I'm late, there was a lot of traffic. Well, it's probably fairly predictable how much traffic there's going to. Every once in a while, that might be an extenuating circumstance. There's a crash in the Lincoln Tunnel. But 98% of the time, it's predictable. And you should plan your departure time to account for that. So it's not the traffic is not the problem. It's your planning is the problem. So anyway, that's being on time, I guess, is a big deal for me.
I get it. Yeah. A lot of what we're getting at, I think, is the importance of how we're integrated with the words that we say, our integrity about our language. And I know you've got a new book coming out about language and leadership. What new insights about that are you coming to?
Yeah, so I love the way you said that. There's an integrity, there's a wholeness between I say what I mean and I mean what I say. And I think the idea is a lot of the things that we say are unthinking. They're automatic pre-programmed responses, and they come from the Industrial Revolution. For example, like the phrase all hands, but no one is really hired for their hands anymore. They're hired for their heads and their hearts. Some people are. You can have an all hands meeting there, but at a software company, really? And are you sure? Does that make sense? Hey, so blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense? The problem with that is the default condition is, oh, yeah, of course that makes sense. And then we have this mindless head nodding where we're basically trying to suppress it has the impact of suppressing questions, suppressing variability, and, quote, getting everybody on board, which is what we want in the industrial age. I just need you to do your job. I'll make the decisions, you do the doing. And, of course, that doesn't work now, so that language doesn't work either. What you want to say now is, what am I missing? What could be wrong? What's not clear? In other words, make the easy path. Yeah, I think you're all screwed up. Hey, I have no idea what you're talking. Make that the easy response rather than, oh, yeah, everything's fine. Do you have all the tools you want? Right. Oh, right. Yeah. Wrong. Mm-hmm. So if we change the language, and what I learned was changing the language is the beginning and the end. You got to make a decision. You say, you got to commit, say, at some point, I want to be this kind of a leader. I want to embrace the thinking of my people, not just be the sole font of knowledge. But once you do that, then it's about behaviors. And so we found, for example, that the language changes precede the mental changes. We call it acting our way to new thinking, not thinking our way to new action. And we would say, so here's an example. We would say, I got upset one day because we were at a meeting and people were blaming each other. They said, well, they didn't do this and they didn't do this. So finally I said, well, there's no they on Santa Fe, which was very clever because it rhymed. I was lucky that way. You'll have to say the word we. Now, we had all these theys by department and by rank. And so people are saying, well, they want to say they, that guy over there. Well, no, we. And after 6 months, our brains rewired. So when I saw the person in the other department, I saw the person in a different rank, it felt like we, but the word came first. And we have multiple, and there's a couple more in the book, multiple examples of this. And I now have read some research that this is basically the language affects your brain and rewires your synapses so it feels like we, because we is the word we use for our tribe. The tribal boundary ends not where the org chart says. It ends where our language changes from we to they.
Well, David, before I ask my last question, if people want to know more about these ideas that you have and want to find your work, where should they look for you online?
So a couple places. We have a YouTube channel called Leadership Nudges. And just Google Leadership Nudges, David Marquet. And you can subscribe to that channel. We put a new one out every week. They're typically 60 to 90-second videos where I have these little snippets like, don't say, are you sure? Say, how sure are you? Go to dinner, don't order, like exercise your leadership abilities that way. Those are called leadership nudges. And then there's our website, davidmarquet.com and IntentBasedLeadership.com, where you can learn about this idea that's just powerful for people to state their intentions rather than waiting for permission. And again, it's a language-based approach.
Excellent. Well, we'll put links to those down in the show notes and the description for anybody who's listening or watching. And David, my final question is, what's the first thing that a leader could do if they want to start practicing more intent-based leadership?
Well, I think this going to dinner 10 times, like you want to start on yourself. People have a tendency to picture all the things that their team can do better. Well, if they start telling me, they're more proactive, they come to me with more ideas, blah, blah, blah. No, that's wrong. Start on yourself. Live it yourself. It's ridiculously simple. Use your turn signal every time you change lanes. The turn signal, this is intent-based. You're signaling your intent to do something. And signaling intent is a habit. And so every time you change lanes, you're signaling intent. And oh, by the way, like I got a new car, and if it senses, if I say I'm going to go put on the right-hand turn signal, it senses there's a car over there, it squawks at me. So that's what you want to do. You say, hey, here's what we intend to do. We intend to launch the product on time. We intend to delay the launch. We intend to do more testing. We intend to go back to whatever it is. And then the people in your team above you, your peers, and the people working for you will squawk at you if they think it's messed up, because you're inviting that feedback ahead of time, not, oh, yeah, well, yeah, we launched the product, and I thought we probably should do more testing, but we didn't. We launched on time because we put the pressure, and now we have feedback because it's happened, versus inviting feedback ahead of time. But I'm a huge fan of practicing on yourself in a safe, non-work environment and then taking it to work. So use your turn signal and don't order when you go to dinner. Then go to work and try it.
Excellent. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show, and hello to all your listeners. And what you guys do as leaders is really, really important work, because you have the lives of human beings hinging on your behaviors. Thank you.